Rise News analyst Dr. Sam Amadi joins us to discuss the federal government's concern about Nigerians' lack of trust in elected officials and how to restore the people's trust in their leaders. A very good day to you, Dr. Sam Amadi, and welcome to the program. I'm going to get straight into it. These are shocking statistics. Of 1,280 contested political offices, 1,209 are being challenged in the courts. Now, if the leaders who are contesting for these positions clearly seem to not have any faith in the system, and that's across the political board, how are citizens supposed to have faith in the same system?
Well, that's a good question to ask. First, the level of public distrust is very high. I think I've said it here before. The Afro barometer that measures this says about 75% of Nigerians do not have confidence in the judiciary. About the same number do not have confidence in the INEC, the regulator of elections. So this was before the 2023 election, which further would damage public trust. So we are living in an age of total lack of trust in our leaders, in our institutions. And it shows by the number of votes, elections, petition you have. Many of them, like some of those discussants said at that conference, are very, very, have no prima facie case to go on. So it's difficult to find the election concludes without somebody challenging the election, either challenging the qualification, look for something to just see if you can get him out. Now, many factors are driving that. First is the openness of rules. I mean, it's interesting, and that's a fact, very sad, that many of the litigants are hoping that they could have connection to judges who could help them, give them judgment, not on the legal merit. So they can tell you, many politicians will say, you know what, if you advise them and say, look, this case looks very bad. I mean, this is nothing here. They say, let's just put it in. You don't know what can happen. So error, either good faith error by judges or even very evident and clear, error based on pecuniary consideration. So they weaponize poverty, they weaponize corruption. And so they expect that somehow, the odds are always up. Nothing is shut down, nothing is foreclosed. You don't know. For example, the Supreme Court, there's a case that was filed in 2000 challenging even the governor of Imo State, the current governor, whether he's qualified. And since 2000, that case was kind of shut down. And now, maybe political tide changes. The case is now coming up on October 31st this year, a case that could end the tenure of the governor a few days to election. So this is some of the uncertainties and imponderable about Nigerian election. People have no confidence in the rules. People actually feel they can manipulate the rules endlessly, and there are no certainty. Look at the cases, judgment from across the high courts. Look at the case across the Court of Appeal. Sometimes Supreme Court itself, cases that are totally opposed to each other. You wonder how could a rational consideration create 2-3 different outcomes from the same court. So this is what corruption procures. This is what recklessness procures. This is what the sense of, puts is a game. Put the dice, throw the dice. It could fall, head or tail. So you don't know. So this is not good for democracy, and that's what is creating this sense of let's just go to the court. Many of these cases probably shouldn't be there. Again, if the institutions that regulate these transactions, election, INEC particularly, had some clear procedures for dealing with matters and deal with them authoritatively. So people say, okay, fine, INEC has gone through a process, and that process shows you what we call in administrative law, records. So they make decisions on record. So you know that this is the process they use to say yes or no. And then when you look at it, you know that process kind of forecloses you up to 90%. So why go and take a risk to go to court? But because these decisions are not made with rigor, not made on records, not made with procedures, and therefore sometimes they are right or wrong, but basically it's like discretional. It creates a sense of uncertainty and open-endedness. So we really need to reform our systems. The judicial jurisprudence, the jurisprudence of elections have to be reformed. The institutional process, the administrative rule process in which agencies, parties, everybody make decision has to be, improved and reformed so that you now have a sense in which people first get confidence in decisions made at every level, and then they have less incentive to try to game or to try their luck, because basically there's no luck to try.
Well said, Dr. Amadi. Now, how crucial would you say ethical governance is, when it comes to addressing the identified challenges and enhancing public trust? That was outlined by a civil rights group, Accountability Lab Nigeria,
Sure.
and they're placing that really high on the pedestal. I'm just wondering what your take is on that.
Totally agree with them. I mean, look, what ethical governance does is what we call signaling. It tells people this is really what the system is prepared for. So when you govern ethically, and governance does not mean just governor or president, it means all role occupants, civil servants, decision makers at the formal and informal level. It sends a strong signal and reorients people towards ethical viewpoint. One of the biggest challenges of Nigeria today is the lack of public ethics. It goes in many forms. Take, for example, what should a public officer say and not say? Who should you appoint? Can you just appoint your son, your in-law, to be the next governor, to be the chief accountant, to take positions that require, if you look at some states, some of the commissioners of finance are their in-laws, are their relatives. So that inability to put a shield between you and the public interest, public good, creates a sense of everything is anyhowness, as put in Nigeria. So anyhowness, creates recklessness. So people do everything because rules don't bind, morals don't constrain. So if you begin to have ethical governance, it reorients people to new expectations. And so people begin to reform, condition their behavior to line up with those ethical signals. So we are now totally very unethical people, and I had the president has appointed an SA on social values. They have to work extremely hard, think around even exams, think around universities, projects. People expect that, look, just go and pass. The students already know that the lecturers will write their project for them, they make budget to pay them. So we are living an unethical landscape where people really have no orientation. And this is important. It's not just about making laws. I mean, laws ride on the back of values, norms, because if there's no consequence and no social reprehension for breaking the rules, then people can break the rules. It depends on now rational calculation of cost benefit. Will they catch me? If they catch me, can I ask my parents to call or my friend to call the IG and they get me out? Those now become rational, totally amoristic consideration. But if you have a rule of law state, it has to be undergirded by some moral commitments. And those moral commitments are cascade from ethical leadership, not just governance. Leadership that's ethical, that now orient people norms towards certain accepted behavior. And we too, without being forced, without enforcement, begin to align with those expectations built by ethical leadership. So I agree with them that for too long we've had a lot of transactional leadership, which basically has no opportunity to create a norm that conditions what we expect leaders to do and what leaders expect us to respond to. And so we're now in some kind of moral desert, moral, if you like, collapse of values, crisis of value, to the extent that it's now self-reinforcing. Political leaders themselves begin to even extend and go to the extreme of misbehavior and lawlessness. And the political followers themselves get numbed and lives around it and don't feel that, look, something wrong is happening. So that's how Nigeria talk about anyhowness now becomes a national order, a national value system.
That's right, of course. And, when we speak of ethical leadership and its lack, it means that there's no authority in the system. And without authority, there can't be legitimacy. Now, my question is, earlier we heard a comment about how elections are not the only aspect of democracy. Do you feel that there is a patriotism issue at play?
Sorry, it's a paycheck.
Patriotism, a lack of patriotism, a lack of a love for one's nation.
Sure. Okay. I think, the thing about patriotism is that sometimes we make it look too esoteric or something like airy, spiritual. You see, patriotism is a social construct between people and their state. You are patriotic because you value your state, because your state values you. So, yes, you're right, there's lack of patriotism, and this is important. In the First Republic, if you look at, there were issues of corruption, but they were incidental. People go into government because development. So all the parties, whether it's UPN, whether it's NCC, whether it's NPC, or the other splitters, they had a robust notion of developing the country. And then supplementarily or incidentally, they benefit themselves. But today, the focus of politics in Nigeria is primarily and almost wholly self-benefit. Then development is collateral. The development just happens as incidental to self-enrichment. And that's the problem. So that means there's no patriotism. And that patriotism really has to be developed when we now begin to refocus governance. I think the leadership, those who are president and governors, have more responsibility here. First, patriotism cannot go on with asking for Jeep, Prado Jeep for everybody. I mean, look, in the time we are here now, we're talking about cutting off everything for the poor. We're talking about people tightening their belt to the point of choking. It's really a lack of patriotism for leaders to not even denounce, reduce their take-home, knowing that they can manage, but to even add to that. So you are sending a message to everybody that, look, we are here not for the nation, because in the time of economic crisis, as this government is putting across the world, because there's no basis to ask people to pay fuel for 645,000 naira from 180-something. That is a rate shock that's heavy. And the only logic for it is that, look, we are in a fiscal crisis of such proportion that the poor has to be asked to swallow the bullet. Now the rich, those in government, are now telling us that they're going to find a way to make themselves stay normal in a normal time. That is the extreme of lack of patriotism. And so what you're telling Nigerians is, look, we don't care about this country, we don't care about you guys, so everybody is going to be thinking about himself. And that's the death of patriotism. The patriotism is a product of social compact, and that social compact is lubricated by what people in government, in informal leadership position do. Every day, if you look at the most patriotic countries by index, are the countries where the leaders are living frugally, leaders are involved in their life, leaders experience what they're experiencing and show symbolic display of commitment. They have skin in the game. They show that, look, they suffer the same thing. Sometimes you see them walk on the streets. Sometimes if there's tragedy, they cry on stage, on television. If there's children are captured or die or something bad happens, that's what they're called mourner-in-chief. They are creating a moral compass between themselves and society, and therefore transmitting that sense of ownership of state, and that's patriotism. So when I just say, oh, let's be patriotic, they make it look like it's a spiritual thing. It's Indeed. Something that comes upon us. No, it's everyday event that reinforces for us that this country is our country. They care for us, we should care for the country. And when there's tragedy, we support it. When we need to sacrifice, we sacrifice. But when the leaders are not sacrificing, then you can't preach patriotism to people who see the state as an enemy.
I don't know who could have said it better, but we certainly appreciate your time. Arise News analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi, thank you for your time here on Newsday. We appreciate you as always.